Welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net. You can find our video and podcast series at whiskeypolitics.net. You can also find us at America's Voice Network, YouTube, and our podcast series on every app. Just search and subscribe to Whiskey Politics. And if on iTunes, please provide us that 5-star rating as it helps others find us. We just spent the day at the American Freedom Alliance Shootings Conference, where some great Americans came out to hear some experts, speakers, authors, to discuss the facts, the fallacies, the freedom, and the future. Whatever the statistics show, whether school shootings are increasing or decreasing, I think no matter what your political stripe, we can all agree something dark is happening with our youth. The partisans will immediately jump on gun rights or gun control. I certainly am an advocate for the Second Amendment, but for those around my age, we never saw this growing up. What has happened in our culture and our society where this is almost now a common occurrence? The American Freedom Alliance and Dr. Karen Sigmund hosted this all-day event, and we sat down with all of the speakers. Now, due to the number of interviews, we have broken this down to 3 episodes, and we'll release the next 2 shortly. In this episode, we talk with Andrew Klavan, host of his own show on The Daily Wire, and we discuss how the left's narrative, how the mainstream media is drowning out the conversation with their narrative, to the point where it's all our kids are hearing. We also sit down with Kushuv, who is one of the students from the Stoneman Douglas High School shootings in Parkland, Florida. Now, you may not have heard his name because his perspective on gun rights goes against the mainstream media narrative. And we finish with a discussion with Dr. Warren Farrell, the author of The Boy Crisis, who discusses how, as parents and as a society, we can prevent future mass shootings. Now, this isn't an easy issue, as there's really no solid answers. As parents, and especially as a man, this is something I'm always guilty of, we want to fix the problem. We just want to find the solution. Fortifying our schools, or preventing kids from having access to their parents' guns, or just being more involved with our kids' lives, especially those that are having social problems, seems to be what most people can agree we can do. But no one really has a solution. Now, while we discuss this issue, I always have to remind myself I'm not one of the dozens of parents who tragically lost a child or is now coping with my son or daughter's life being altered forever due to a critical injury. I, like most, can only view this from the outside. And it's a perspective where my politics, of course, will always play a role. But whatever one's perspective, I think we can all agree that there's a need for us to continue this discussion. As parents, we all wonder at the back of our minds, is our own kid's school next? So this is the first of its kind series here on Whiskey Politics, where we discuss one major issue with 9 guests over 3 different episodes. So pour yourself your favorite beverage, sit back and listen to today's guests, with Andrew Klavan, Kushuv, and Dr. Warren Farrell. Dave Sussman back at the American Freedom Alliance. Andrew Klavan is joining us. Andrew Klavan, which really needs no introduction for our listeners at Ricochet, and obviously hosted the podcast at The Daily Wire, Andrew Klavan Show, author, Great Good Thing, and just a great screenwriter and all-around great good guy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So obviously you have a lot to say. You say it every single day. Today we're talking about gun violence.
Right.
You've been talking a lot about how the media is portraying the debate right now.
Right.
What are your thoughts on what we're seeing, and especially in just the past week and the last few days?
Yeah, it's been, it's obviously it's terrible, but I think that every time this happens, what we fight over is narrative. We're fighting over story. Who wins? Who owns the story of these tragic events? Now, it should be said that just because we should deal in facts, that school shootings there are fewer school shootings now than there were in the 1990s. Murder, of course, has dropped incredibly since the 1970s. So there really isn't even that kind of an emergency problem, but obviously anytime a young person gets killed in a murder, it's a terrible thing. So we're fighting over the meaning of this and over the meaning of the story. And I always feel that the right says, well, the story's about facts, it's about boys being mistreated, it's about boys being overly drugged on Ritalin, which is certainly true. It's about the just death of manhood and all these different things. And then, of course, the left is always saying, guns, 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 give us your guns, guns, guns. And I was just trying to make the point that none of this is about guns. The Second Amendment isn't about guns. It's just about freedom. And once you realize that you're talking about freedom and the story that we're telling is about freedom, once you realize that, you realize there's no room for negotiation. There's no room. I'm not giving you a bump stock. I'm not giving you this. I'm not giving you that. I'm not giving you anything because that's my freedom. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit today about the way I see these stories and what I feel our guns do. I'm not a gun guy. I'm not,
right.
Whenever these conversations devolve into, you can take my gun when you pry my cold dead fingers off, or you're an idiot, you don't know what an AR-15 is. I start to roll my eyes. I'm not that guy,
Yeah.
But I am a freedom guy, and I do understand that the left has been after our individual freedom since at least the turn of the last century, and they have really made incredible strides in developing an unassailable, unanswerable state that is not touched by the Constitution, and that just makes gun ownership all the more important. And so when I hear people talking about safety, of course, do I want our children safe? Goes without saying. But when I hear them talking about safety or hunting or all these things, I just think that's not my story. My story is freedom. Guns are necessary for freedom. That's why my right to own them should not be infringed.
The left have been very effective in using fear, emotion as a motivator as part of their argument. What you're talking about is a much broader spectrum. How do you attach an emotional quotient to freedom?
Well, I think that there are people who say, in fact, Buchanan, I can't remember. Pat Buchanan the other day said, democracy has no content, freedom has no content, it doesn't spur people emotionally. I don't believe that at all. I just believe that you have to tell the story right, because the minute you understand what it means to lose your freedom, freedom has a whole lot of emotional content.
Okay.
One of the things about people who talk for a living and write for a living is we don't get it because the First Amendment protects us. So we don't get how a regulation can come into your business, nobody to appeal to, nobody pass the law, nobody to vote out of office, and a regulation can come into your business and take away everything you have. Some of these people who don't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding because that offends them religiously, right. They're not being taken down by law, they're being taken down by regulation, and they have no one to appeal to. So we don't understand that emotionally because the First Amendment protects us from that kind of regulation. But once you understand how the government can come in and take everything you have with no way of appeal, freedom becomes pretty emotional pretty quick. And we don't tell those stories enough, obviously, and we don't really know how to deliver those narratives.
Those are the victims of that, and they have little voice. It seems to me that there's a tsunami right now. We're talking about gun violence, and not necessarily gun rights per se, but the effect on our culture and our society. And I mean, I've got kids, my 17-year-old, he was at a protest from his high school. They walked out, and he's holding up the sign, and my job as a father is to try and pull him back. But we seem to be, if you turn on the television and watch the media today, we seem to be losing the fight in the culture. Debates like this, I don't know who's hearing it or if enough people are hearing it. Is that a concern to you?
Well, it is a concern, but I do think that conservatives are naturally pessimistic, and I'm not that naturally pessimistic. Conservatives always think we're losing the culture, and they always think, maybe going all right now,
yeah.
but give us 10 minutes and we'll all be in chains. And I do think, look, that's always a danger. It's always a true danger. But you have to remember that, nobody's watching CNN. People,
you see the numbers yesterday?
People watch.
Right.
The only time you see CNN is when you're running to catch a plane.
Yeah.
And
nobody's watching it there either.
Nobody's watching it there either, and people are watching. I mean, why do you think they're trying to censor us on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook? It's because that's where people live. And the kind of what they now call the intellectual dark web, the people who are speaking logically and telling other kinds of stories, are reaching a lot of people. I'm a little more optimistic about this. I think that this thing with guns it's obviously, you see a child die with it. We all have families, it's common to say, I can't imagine the suffering of these people, but you have children, you can imagine it plenty well, so it's like,
horrifying.
It's easy to manipulate this, but I just think that the left has gotten so far out over its skis in manipulating people. People aren't that stupid, they know when they're being played with.
Logistically, do you think there's room for some type of change to some of the laws, or is it just we can't move an inch because it's a slippery slope?
It's funny.
Because you're not a gun guy,
no, I'm
right?
not a gun guy.
So,
I know. It's funny. Every time this happens,
yeah,
they go through the laws that they want to pass and
yeah,
to check if it would have stopped the guy. And I really don't think there are that many laws that you can pass because, as the NRA is fond of saying, outlaws don't follow the law. That is the whole point. It's like,
yeah.
So I really would like to see. I really am, as somebody who does not care about guns one bit, right? I am kind of a fanatic about this. I'd rather see more people concealed carrying like they do in Texas. In Texas, even grandmas is carrying.
We've been talking with some of the folks, some of the speakers here today, and that's what some people are saying may be one of the solutions in schools, training some of the teachers.
Sure, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's a fight against that, even that.
Yeah.
Training people. And so I don't...
Because, Dave, it's because they want the guns.
That's one so it's basically repeal the Second Amendment or, you're all the devil.
That's the way I feel about it. Because the thing is, they will not concede anything because they want the guns because they want your freedom. They want your freedom. They really do. And I'm not talking about the ordinary Democrat or the ordinary person who sort of sees this out of the corner of his eye and reacts emotionally. I'm talking about the progressive left, which is a very, very strong portion of the Democrat Party, the Obama left. They really believe that they can run things much better. Thank you very much. We don't need your input. You can vote for this leftist or that leftist, but we don't really want your input. As long as the administrative state is in place, we'll take care of things. Thanks a lot. That's the people. Those are the people I think we have to fight.
Yeah. What's the trajectory look like for you? We're obviously heading into 6 months to election, 2.5 years to another election. Do you think this is a strong motivator for the left, or does that actually benefit the right?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm not a predictor of elections.
Right.
I really don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen. But right this minute, I'm feeling awfully good. It's, people make this joke that Donald Trump is playing three-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
But I don't think you have to play three-dimensional chess when the other side is hitting itself in the head with a hammer. All he has to say is MS-13 or animals, and suddenly Nancy Pelosi is out there talking about the spark of divinity in MS-13 members. They're so reactive. They're so crazy. And
I heard your show on this.
Yeah,
this week.
It is just amazing to me to watch them bury themselves. But it's a delight. It's an absolute delight.
And Hamas. Right, using children as cannon fodder.
They're supporting Hamas,
Right.
I really do think that you can't spread enough fake news to get Americans to say, oh yeah, Hamas, that makes sense to me. So I just want the left to run on this. I want Democrats in the midterms to run on, we support Hamas and we support MS-13 and the spark of divinity in MS-13, and then we'll bury them.
Yeah. You're a storyteller,
yeah.
Right? You're not a prognosticator, and your episodes are fantastic, and on Ricochet we listen to them all the time, and you've got a great big following. Can conservatives improve our storytelling as a whole?
I really do think they can, and I think they are. One of the things that older people don't understand is that, like, the movies are kind of over. Even TV. Kids are watching YouTube. They're watching things on their phones, and the right is on Twitter. The right is hilarious. They're really funny.
Yeah.
They're quick and witty, and they go out there. They storm the barricades with the facts as quickly as they possibly can.
But is that an echo chamber, though?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes, but not entirely. Once you get past a certain point, it's not.
Okay.
And the thing is that, we have been blacklisted,
right.
literally blacklisted out of Hollywood. Actors who speak up for Trump can't get work. Writers who support Trump can't get work. It really is like that. And when that happens, people go elsewhere. So they do podcasts and they write novels and they do their podcasts. They do the stuff I'm doing, and I think that in this kind of weird niche market democratic media world, I think that's working. And that's why they're panicked. That's why they're fighting so hard to shadow ban us on Twitter, to drop our stuff on the search lines in Google, and why we should be very careful to fight back and make as much noise as we possibly can, because they really do want, they understand story. And the reason they understand story is they don't believe in truth. They believe the story is the truth. Mm-hmm. And what we believe is that you have to tell stories about the truth, which is a very different thing. But for them, it's much more urgent, and so they understand it, and they've worked very hard to own the means of communication. And our billionaires, our storytellers, and just our ordinary people have to make sure to talk back, you know? I mean, I get this question all the time. How do I stand up to my teacher? How do I stand up? And what they're really asking is, how do I stand up to them without consequence?
Yes.
And there's no way. You got to take the consequence. It's worth it. If you believe in fighting for your country, nobody's asking you to, go to Afghanistan. Nobody's asking you, but you do have to speak the truth.
Yeah. Real quick segue here. You just talked about this at this event. You were not a big fan of Donald Trump.
No.
It's well known. You've talked about it many, many times now that you believe that he is performing exceedingly well beyond your expectations, for a lot of us as well. Do you think that there are enough people on the other side, or at least centrist or blue dog or traditional liberals, that also feel satisfied with the way things are going?
Oh yeah, I'm not a prognosticator.
Right.
But I did live through the Reagan era, and remember Reagan got exactly what Trump is getting, and there was no alternative media at the time.
Yeah.
He was hammered every single day. He was crazy every day. I was a left-winger at the time. I was a Democrat. I thought he was a monster. I thought he was a warmonger. And then one day I looked around and I thought, you know what? Everything he says comes true. Everything he says is going to happen happens. You cut taxes, the economy improves, you stand up to the Soviet Union, they back down. Oh, look, the Berlin Wall is falling. Reality has a voice, and I think that reality does change people's minds, and Trump is doing a good job. And you look around and you say, oh, look, the economy is so much better than it was.
Yeah.
People are freer than they were. He's not like stepping on your throat. To me, in business they talk about animal spirits. Just not having that whining, moaning Obama voice in my ear every day telling me how America has to apologize to all the people it's freed and protected over the years. Just that fills me with optimism and joy. And I think it's...
You feel like you can breathe again.
I just don't think it's possible that that's just me. I think there's a lot of
Last question for you. You pointed to the intellectual dark web. If that's, it's being known as now. Right. You got your Jordan Petersons and your Rubins and the Weinsteins. You're on that. You're in that group, and I am really optimistic because I feel like, just from a personal anecdote, I am spending more time watching YouTube than anything.
Right.
Sports and YouTube for me. Occasional on Netflix, Amazon.
Yeah.
I feel like I am just sucking from a fire hose of so much good content, yours and others. This is a nascent industry. What do you see as the future, where we are right now? Podcasters and video, Daily Wire?
It's a really good question. It's almost impossible. I like to say that I'm the part of the intellectual dark web. It has no intellect, only darkness. I'm just the dark part of the intellectual dark web. But it's very hard to say because of technology and the incredible rapid change of technology. If I look at my resume today, almost everything I do for a living didn't exist when I started out. I mean, that's amazing
incredible
thing. And some of it didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when you say, where is this going to go? It's really hard to know, because every time a business starts to solidify, starts to get a little bit sclerotic, and starts losing its originality, somebody invents some new way to tell a story, some 3D, TV or something that's broadcast on the moon. Who knows what it's going to be? So it's really hard to say where this is going. But I think there's going to be more, not less. I mean, I think that's the one thing we can say, that there's going to be more stuff, not less, and that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing, and appreciate you taking the time, and appreciate you doing what you do on a daily basis. It's a lot of work, and you and Ben and Michael, it's a lot of fun to watch you guys over at the Daily Wire. So, and also we hear you over in Ricochet, so join us anytime.
Thanks very much.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I received an email from a listener who asked how we get such interesting guests on our show. First, our intrepid producer, Melissa, is amazing. And secondly, as we just discussed with Andrew, we are in a new age where content is no longer controlled by biased corporations who decide what you should hear. At Whiskey Politics, our focus is the long-form discussions with brilliant minds, insiders, and newsmakers who, whether you agree with their politics or not, all have had an impact on our culture, politics, and society. It's truly an honor to have these conversations, as it's our little way we can make an impact. Hearing from listeners who tell me they have a new perspective on things just for listening to our series is truly heartwarming. If you wish to meet many of our guests, I always recommend coming out to the different conferences we attend, like this last weekend's the America's Freedom Alliance. Our next big one will be at this summer's Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest 2018 will be held July the 11th through the 14th at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas, and the Whiskey Politics team will be back on Media Row interviewing the luminaries insiders we've either had on our show or are welcoming on for the first time, many of whom you watch and read. I'll also be speaking and moderating some panels. Some of the speakers will include Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk, John Stossel, Nick Gillespie, Jennifer Grossman, Grover Norquist, Heather McDonald, George Will, Deneen Borelli, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Steve Forbes, Larry Elder, John Mackey, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Lowry, and dozens more. Registering for Freedom Fest provides you access to the intellectual debates. Sometimes they get quite heated. Panels and speeches with leaders in their respective fields. And you'll also be able to attend the award-winning Anthem Film Festival. It's the world's only libertarian film festival, which is included in the fee. So join us at this year's Freedom Fest and stop by the Whiskey Politics booth on Media Row to say hello. If you register now, get your tickets at freedomfest.com and use the code WHISKEY100. You'll save yourself $100. That's right. Register at freedomfest.com. Make sure you use the coupon code WHISKEY100. Again, freedomfest.com, WHISKEY100, and we'll see you there. Delighted to be here with Kyle Kushuv. Kyle Kushuv is a junior at the Parkland High School in Florida. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
A couple of things. First of all, you were just talking with me, and you had a whole bunch of different media interviews over the couple of months since the tragedy, except for CNN, which canceled your interview.
Yeah, except for CNN, yeah.
Right. But why do you think it is that CNN would have canceled? Do you believe that there is a narrative that you're not filling?
I don't think what happened specifically with CNN represents a media bias that does exist throughout all the media networks. I think there's a media bias regardless of whether I was canceled or not on CNN. The CNN incident has nothing to do with their inherent bias of not having me on the show because I'm a pro-Second Amendment kid. I think overall it's undeniable that there's an absolute bias against people who are pro-Second Amendment or conservative on left-leaning or just absolutely leftist TV shows.
Okay. And that bias, it comes from a perspective of what? The gun control, obviously, but removing the Second Amendment, do you think?
Look, what I can tell you is that a lot of the narrative being pushed right now is a mask for eventually repealing the Second Amendment. You can see that the slow push of their ideas have shifted from just common sense to, repealing semi-automatic firearms for the eventual end of the Second Amendment. And I don't think I'm being irrational when I say that. I think there's a clear push for that, and it's inherent. Basically, by saying that you cannot possess a semi-automatic weapon, which is in the March for Our Lives website, you're basically saying that you are practically banning most uses of the Second Amendment, which a semi-automatic weapon includes a pistol, certain shotguns, all rifles, most rifles, and the notion that some people who are afraid of the push to repeal the Second Amendment are being irrational is wrong, because I can absolutely tell you that there is a huge push, specifically by the left and by the extreme left, to mask their movement of eventually repealing the Second Amendment under titles like common sense gun reform, which means absolutely nothing.
Common sense gun reform doesn't mean anything because it's all related to, creating more laws, which in the case of just recently with Texas wouldn't have prevented anything.
No,
right?
Exactly. They're not common sense. They're if you look at it on an outside perspective and you're ignorant, they seem like common sense. But the thing is, common sense entails that you're actually trying to solve the problem, but they're not. They're doing absolutely nothing. And the reason why they're pushing their common sense agenda is because eventually they want the slow repeal of the Second Amendment. And I know I sound somewhat irrational when I say this, but it's true. I can tell you that I've been in this debate for a very long time, I'd say a few months. And the entire notion of the left and the March for Our Lives, although they'll mask it as we just want common sense gun reform, what in reality what they do want is that they don't want you to have the ability to properly defend yourselves. They want you to use outdated weaponry to defend yourself, which has been proven that it's not the same. Like, when you have certain people have certain weapon preferences to best defend themselves, and when you allocate a specific gun for every individual, it doesn't fit everyone perfectly. Some people have an AR-15 preference, some people have a pistol, some people prefer the shotgun, and by therefore allocating a specific gun, closing the range of what gun you can have, completely goes against the Second Amendment. And even more so, they don't believe in the basic fundamental notion that the Second Amendment was written up for the specific reason to make sure that you have a deterrent against a tyrannical government. The Founding Fathers understood. I don't think we give the Founding Fathers credit enough for what amazing document they wrote up. And I can tell you that they truly had the foresight to understand that we have to make sure that our citizens can protect themselves, not only from themselves, but the Second Amendment, in a minimal aspect, allows you to defend yourself, and you don't have full reliance on the government, because we know that the government sucks. And we saw that the government sucks, specifically what happened in Parkland. But even more so, it's that we don't trust the government, and the government can eventually become tyrannical. And when it does, the people should have the opportunity to revolt. But in places like Venezuela and in other places where the government has become tyrannical, because they don't have such weaponry, they aren't able to revolt. And then they're stuck in a place of pure oppression. In addition, what I don't think people truly understand is that a gun is an equalizer. I think a gun truly is the most feminist thing you could do. If you want true female equality, the ability to properly defend yourself. For instance, I made this note on Piers Morgan. I said, why shouldn't a single mother who's 20 of 2 kids be able to defend herself? Because she's 20 and she's not 21, she shouldn't be able to acquire a gun. It's absolutely ludicrous. And I really think that a gun is the ultimate equalizer for women.
So you disagree with the idea that although handguns are 21 and up, that
I don't
rifles,
think handguns should be 21. I don't know why.
You don't think they should be?
There has not
It's been that way since 1968, I think. It's the number of murders in this country by far and away are with handguns.
No, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I'm very much aware that the fact that they didn't ban assault rifles in general constitutes a reason as to why a lot of gun culture in America are with assault rifles. But the reason they did that, it's useless. But the reason they did that is because most of the deaths, like the homicides, are with pistols.
Right.
But raising the age doesn't change the fact. It doesn't alter. It doesn't save anyone. It does absolutely nothing. The same reason why the proposed legislation that actually passed in Florida, which raises the age from 18 to 21 to buy a rifle, does absolutely nothing.
You disagreed then with Republican Governor Rick Scott on this
Oh,
approach.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think
Okay.
I don't know why he made that decision, but I can tell you that I don't think he made the right decision.
Okay. Let me ask you 2 questions. First of all, I have a son your age, okay? And he's, he wants to go into journalism, and he sees things from a left of center perspective, and I'm trying to pull him back in every day that I can. But where did you get your perspective? I mean, you have a historical perspective on things that a lot of grown adults don't have. Where did it come from?
To be honest, I think the perspective that I have lies solely in just looking at all sides of history and coming to the conclusion that through facts, this is the right thing to do. I'm never going to push legislation or have an idea that isn't factually based. And I've talked to Dr. Lott, and his research is amazing in that he provides evidence for every single reason as to what needs to be done, because we shouldn't do something that makes you feel good. Okay, that doesn't solve the problem. We need to pass legislation that actually does something. Mm-hmm. Like the proposed legislation by the Democrats doesn't do anything. It makes you feel better. It doesn't solve the problem. Solving the problem, which is somewhat counterintuitive to what some people might think, is that we have to grow the Second Amendment. I've said this before, that if it's been proven, which it has been proven, that gun ownership saves so many more lives than it takes. It saves in the hundreds of thousands. It's a tiny estimate, but more than hundreds of thousands every year, versus it takes 13,000 homicides every year and around 27,000 suicides. So the insane benefit of having guns in society outweighs the negatives by far, and that's why I think we should be pushing, as the Republicans have the House and the Senate and the Executive Office and the Supreme Court, they need to push legislation that will actually solve this problem.
Was your father, was your mother, were they involved in gun rights growing up?
Oh, no, absolutely. My parents are not political in the slightest.
Okay.
At all. I was thrust into this from a sheer sense of, I didn't want to be here. Truly, to be honest with you, I never wanted this. I just had to do this because I had a viewpoint that wasn't being represented, and that was the actual factual thing, and I don't want to see a school shooting happen ever again.
Okay. So when you say that you don't want to be here, you are taking...
I don't want to be in the current... I never wanted to be in the position that I currently am, that is pushing legislation. That was never my end goal. My end goal was to make sure that I was solving the problem.
Right. And so from your perspective, you're seeing an overwhelming sympathy towards the left's perspective, okay? Gun control, reducing gun rights, more laws, and such. You were there at Parkland. Horrific, stunningly horrific. Whatever side of the debate you are, I think there's a lot of us, especially in my generation, we didn't grow up with this. Okay, I was your age in the 1980s in high school. We never saw this kind of thing. Okay. Well,
that's different as to whether you didn't see it versus where it was occurring, because mass shootings have been on the decline.
Well, the last mass shooting before Columbine in 1998 was, I think, in the late 1960s.
No, but they are average on the decline currently. Whether you see it in prominence in the media, mass shootings are on the decline.
So, okay, that's a good trend, but we are still seeing this. We just had one a couple of days ago in Texas.
And I'd like to add on to that you didn't see the outpouring of support from the left towards that community, which is kind of disgusting, because the amount of intense support by the left for Parkland students somewhat issues a conclusion that they only care about the kids who can help push their narrative. Personally, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. If you're in a school shooting, I want to help you. But I think there was a clear gap in the left's response to the Santa Fe shooting, because the majority of the class there are Republicans. They don't want to see gun control. They want to see strengthening of schools. I'm not sure if you saw this, but there was not the immense outreach of celebrities and mainstream media. Have you seen the town hall? When's the next CNN town hall for Santa Fe? I'd love to see that.
And that last one was a disaster.
Oh, it was absolutely a disaster. But if CNN is truly going to show that they're unbiased, I mean, they should follow their trend.
Right. Okay. So from a 17, 18-year-old perspective, junior, senior in high school, do you feel there is an answer outside of government? Do you feel there's a cultural issue here?
What I can tell you is that I haven't looked into it enough to make you a clear statement, but my opinion is that we have a generation of fatherless children who aren't brought up morally. Jordan P. Peterson talks about it all the time, about the necessity of having a mother and a father in a stable relationship, and the immense importance of having a moral backbone and having a mother and a father who can make sure their kid is raised properly. What we see a lot of now is a neglect of kids, both emotionally, because a lot of the roles by the father aren't being done as they should be. You see that a lot of kids grow up neglected, and in addition, what we have here is that we have a culture where mainstream media blasts the kid's face in the name and its notoriety. Like, it's been shown that a lot of these shooters,
copycats,
they want the fame. Yeah, they truly want the fame, and they do this. Oh, how do I kill more people so the mainstream media will cover it more? We've seen that. And what I don't understand is that why is mainstream media consistently showing the name and the faces and discussing and publicizing the people? You can publicize the story, but don't publicize and give attention to the person. What I've seen in this last situation, which was it was better than last time at my school, is that they did not publicize the shooter's name as much as they did for my school. And I saw that was somewhat of a positive trend, and I hope that continues.
You're here today speaking at this confab. What is your message to all of the guests here?
I want to make sure that the legislation that can be done in the next few months is enacted. I want to make sure that we grow the Second Amendment, because based on statistics, the Second Amendment saves much more lives, and by growing the Second Amendment, it actually creates a safer America. In essence, whether you think that's counterintuitive or not, the Second Amendment saves more lives when you grow it. And I would like to see nationally, people have begun to understand this, that the ability of people to not rely on the government. See, the entire issue with my school is in most school shootings, the shots are fired in the first 5 minutes. And then after that, either he's confronted the shooter, or he leaves, he runs away, or he kills himself. What I want to see is the ability of first responders to be there immediately, whether it's teachers or if it's school resource officers who can actually do their damn job. I want to see the increase in those resources. What I don't understand is that this has happened in so many states and it's actually been effective. Why are we not allowing teachers who are able-bodied and who actually have experience with guns to have a concealed carry? Because in the first few minutes, when that's a life-or-death situation for the entire school, they're basically defenseless.
Right.
We need to make sure we have to strengthen our schools. And even more so, why are we blaring a signal, an absolute light show, for shooters to say, oh, this is a gun-free zone, so no one's going to confront me when I come in, so I can go in there and do whatever I want and then run away or kill myself? Why is this happening? It's been proven that 99% of shootings occur in gun-free zones. I don't understand why this is not understood in Congress and the Senate, that gun-free zones do not work. And we have to make sure that we strengthen our schools to make sure that, A, there's a huge deterrent.
Yeah.
Because when students go into a school knowing that there's not going to get any resistance, they go in. But when they know that they're going to be confronted by, they don't know which teacher has a gun, they don't know how many school resource officers there are, they're heavily deterred from going in. And what I don't think is, in a different situation, what I don't think has been addressed is the sheer irony of what happened at my school and then the response for it. Because what happened in my school is that there was a failure of government on so many different levels. It was the cowards of Broward, the FBI, the Child Protective Service, the Promise Program. School administrators from my school failed. The government failed. Undeniably, the government failed, and it didn't do its job. So why are people turning around and saying we have to trust the government more? No, the government screwed up. They messed up. They didn't do their job. We have to enforce the laws that we have in place. And we should not be giving our rights away to a failing government who cannot do its job. And I don't understand how that distinction isn't recognized, yet there's a huge push for gun control, but it's not solving the issue at hand, in that the government needs to be held accountable for its inactions. And even more so, I did not see a single sign when I was at the March for Our Lives, the actual walk, that said F the FBI or F the cowards of Broward. And I want to see the government being held accountable. And I think that if we change the shift to the proper understanding of, look, the government failed, we have to make sure that this never happens again. And countless law enforcement officers and sheriffs across the world said, this county failed on this and this and this and this, and this is why. FBI got 2 tips, there were 79 reports, I believe, to the cowards of Broward, and nothing was done. The kid was allowed again onto the campus after going through the Promise program, and he's still a threat. And if this continues to happen, nothing is going to change. There's still going to be mass shootings, and if we really want to stop school shootings, these are the avenues that will actually foster true change rather than making us feel good.
You're touching upon a lot of issues that it's really creating a lot of problems for people, especially on the left, who are pro, they are gun control. You even have some extremists, and maybe they're not extremists anymore on the left, that are talking about total repeal of the Second Amendment. But one of the issues that I've seen, and this is actually something that you've experienced yourself as we did the introduction with you, and that is how the media is responding to all of this. you weren't invited onto CNN. David Hogg and several others were the celebrities of the day, of the month, right?
Oh yeah.
And here you are, and you have a different perspective on things, and we haven't seen that occur yet out of Santa Fe. I think people are trying to figure it all out. What's happening?
What I thought was absolutely disgusting was.
I want to get your perspective on this, please.
Okay, what I thought was absolutely disgusting was the sheer intensity and quick reaction by my fellow students and the media, the left mainstream media, to quickly use this as a platform to push their gun control narrative. And that was disgusting. Even as the shooting was 10 minutes after, people were already pushing for gun control. Are you serious? I don't understand how this isn't noticed. That it's
nothing new, by the way.
I'm
it's on every one of these
new,
incidents.
But I'm saying that have some compassion.
Yes.
Like, that's wrong. It's take away all the political stuff. It's wrong to use such an incident to push your ideology. Even more so, the kids there, they don't want gun control.
What do you say to those, though, that say that this is the time when it's most emotionally impacting people for there to be change? As you know,
we shouldn't
Barack Obama's administration, never waste a crisis.
We should never be pushing legislation based on emotions. And I think throughout this entire situation, we should never be pushing legislation based off emotions.
Right.
Ever. And I think I've made sure that I took my emotions out of every single comment that I've made to make sure that I factually research it before, because I don't want to push legislation that makes me feel good. I want to push legislation that actually does something. And we shouldn't be pushing. That's.
Coming back to my question on the media.
No, I got you. I'm saying we shouldn't be using people's emotions 10 minutes after a shooting to push legislation. And to talk about the media.
And they jumped on you guys, right? I mean, literally on the day of, there were cameras in your faces, and they picked and chose.
You know what was even worse? After the Santa Fe shooting, there were the entire roads were blocked up with camera crews trying to get interviews from Stoneman Douglas kids.
Yes.
The sheer media to just viciously latch onto something. And when I was at Tallahassee, what really stuck up to me, there was a girl who was giving an interview, and she started crying, and instantly, out of nowhere, she literally got suffocated by the amount of at least 100 cameras.
That's what they want, right? That's what they're looking for.
Of course that's what they want. I think the entire American public has such a distrust of the media because they know that they're only doing it for views and for clicks, and that's why the entire trust of the media has just tanked. Because we're tired, Americans are truly tired of the media thinking that they're stupid. Americans aren't stupid. I could think that people on the left, I think it's wrong to think that people on the left are stupid, because I think everyone has the rationality to understand when something is being just tossed into them in fake news. I might think that they're ignorant, and I think that once they're presented the facts, they'll come over to the Republican side. But I think at the end of the day, mainstream media has truly lost its appeal, and it's starting to lose its appeal. I really think it is. I really think that throughout this entire administration, mainstream media has been on the decline. You saw the ratings. You see how much people trust mainstream media. They don't. Mm-hmm. And they're latching on to another shred of hope they can get to boost their ratings and boost their clicks, because you saw after my school they jumped on it because it was a great show for them. And it's disgusting to say, but it was a great show for them. They got the clicks, they got the attention. The CNN Town Hall.
It was horrifying, though, what they did with what's her name, Dana Lash, and you had
Marco Rubio.
You had the different perspectives on things there. It was seeded. I mean, you had the audience that was supposed to be throwing
even
out
more
these.
So, the media. You can have. I'm not making the argument that you should not have survivors of kids from a school on TV. You should, but you should not be parading these kids as untouchable as the gospel that you cannot criticize. Because once you're pushing policy, you need to be criticized and you need to be refuted, because you cannot just say stuff without any response. And what I honestly think that if the students that are going on air should have opposition. When I go on Piers Morgan, I go in there knowing that he's gonna oppose me, and that's a good thing. We should be having a discussion. We shouldn't just be preaching and not having. So
what would you say to David Hogg?
What would I say in what context?
In a discussion like this. You know where he stands. He's being used as a pawn, but you know where his perspective is.
To touch upon the comment you just made, I don't think that that's the right avenue to saying something, because it completely it kind of.
You don't believe there's huge money
No, of
looking
course there
for
is, but I
kids
think-
like him
I think
to
that
be their
there- I think-
spokespeople.
Here's what I think is wrong with the comment. I don't think there's money behind their movement. I'm saying that it's wrong to say that a person who's pushing agenda is doing it for benefit. Because I just think that my peers are just egregiously misinformed. I just think that they're ignorant. But I do think that in some essence, they care. I think we can both agree that they care.
I'm not doubting his. I think.
I just don't think that
I
representing that, like whether you're right or wrong, I just don't think we should be labeling students who do this as punks, because it paints a broad narrative to how anyone can be called, and then it delegitimizes everything that they're doing.
Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of people out there that.
So what I say to David
believe,
Hogg?
Yes. Back to that. Okay.
At the end of the day, I really want to have a discussion with David Hogg. From the simple matter of fact is that the public needs to understand what's factual and what's not. And I've told this to Kasky and I've told this to Hogg, and truly if anyone wants to have a discussion with me, have a debate, and it's properly moderated, I love to. Because the only way that we actually get proper solutions is through debate and discussion to get, I don't want to say middle ground, but to get an actual solution. And to maybe have him understand that what he's proposing is absolute fluff, does absolutely nothing. Because that's what it is.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, I want David Hogg to look at all the facts and to take aside from his actual perspective currently, get a new perspective on it, look at all the facts. And if he comes to the current conclusion that he has now, I want to know what brought him to that conclusion, because looking at every single and looking at the entire situation and all the facts and all the statistics, it pushes you to the pro-Second Amendment side. And by talking to actual, not just lobbyists, not talking to lobbyists. You shouldn't be talking to lobbyists when you have an actual political question. By talking to the professionals who actually know what they're doing, like Dr. Lott. They know what they're doing, and they've made research, and they know what the solutions are, versus going to a lobbyist or a celebrity and asking them X, Y, Z and getting a bunch of fluff, which sounds good. Common sense gun reform, it's beautiful. But it doesn't do anything.
Right. Well, a lot of that's going to be implemented by votes, right? So
Okay.
you manipulate the voter.
Of course.
And coming back to what you were talking about
But
earlier,
what's
emotionally.
absolutely amazing, and I love this, is that the NRA rating is back to where it was before. They have 500,000.
They've increased members.
They have 500,000 new members.
Yeah.
The Republicans are only set to lose 3 seats in the House versus it was 16. And America is now more pro-Second Amendment than what it was before. The stances on the Second Amendment have increased towards the Republican side versus going in the opposite direction. Because I really think that Americans do understand and have the logical understanding to come to the conclusion that the Second Amendment is a good thing versus what the mainstream media is trying to present it as a bad thing. So the entire March for Our Lives and Never Again movement, although it started off as a good thing, which is undeniable, it started off pure, it turned into a springboard for the Democrats to push nonsense legislation that would eventually allow them to go against the Second Amendment. Because that's what it is. It's a fight. It really is a fight, and I really want to have legislators in the next few months that they do have these positions of strength to do something, because we don't know what's going to happen after these midterms, even though the Republican side is better than it was before. We need to pass whatever legislation we can currently to ensure the protection of the Second Amendment.
What's next for you?
I don't know. I've always kept all options open. I want to continue pushing legislation. I want to make sure that the Second Amendment is ensured and protected.
Are you still in school?
Yeah, I'm all A's. I'm ranked 1 now.
Nice.
Yeah, man. Ranked 1.
Good for you, man.
Absolutely.
And you're still doing all this?
Oh, yeah, it's insane.
I mean, you're across the country
I have
right
like
now.
20 hours of homework due Wednesday.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Do you know where you want to go to school yet? Are
I
you
have
looking?
no clue.
No idea? Any idea
everything's
what you want to
open.
do?
I don't know, man. I really don't. My
Wow.
entire world has been flipped upside down, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I never really wanted this.
But you are articulate. Whatever the issue is, you have passion for it, and if you have passion for an issue, you have the ability to get out there and be a spokesperson and stand up for it. So whatever it is that you're going to do, man, I'm looking forward to seeing how you,
awesome.
Grow, and maybe we'll have you back on again. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it.
I'm here with Dr. Warren Farrell, PhD, the author of The Boy Crisis. Thanks for joining us.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. So you're attending this event today, and you've just spoken, but for our listeners and viewers, what is that crisis?
The boy crisis is happening all around the world. It's in the, for example, PISA tests distributed by the United Nations find that boys are doing worse than girls in all academic subjects in all of the largest 60 developed nations. And what developed nations have in common, I found, was two things. One is a very high percentage of divorce, and also a permission for women to have children without being married. And in those two groups, there are boys who have a great deal of involvement with their fathers, but a high percentage of boys that have very minimal involvement with their fathers. It's among the boys in those two groups that have minimal involvement with their fathers where the boy crisis resides. Basically, the boy crisis resides where fathers do not reside, if you will. And so that's the core of it.
And what is the impact of that on our society?
The impact is that the boys are far more likely to do worse in every academic area, which means that they are more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to feel like they're ashamed of themselves because they don't have postponed gratification that dads tend to bring to the family table. And without the postponed gratification, they can't get their homework done without getting distracted by video games or other texts or so on. And then they don't do as well in school. They feel badly because they're not respected by other girls or boys, by their teachers. They don't get awards. They don't have the discipline to do the type of preparation for a basketball team or a football team. And so they find that there's a lot of not very much gratification that they get from other students and their peers and their parents. And so they start withdrawing and oftentimes becoming addicted to video games or porn, feeling like girls aren't interested in dating them when it gets to be boy-girl time. And that can lead to a great deal of depression. It can lead to 6 times the amount of suicide among boys as girls in the early 20s. And it can lead to boys becoming, in their worst case example, beyond the suicide is the school shootings, where they feel like I'm invisible at school, nobody respects me, I'll teach them, I'll show them that I am something, and have a few moments of visibility when they felt so invisible.
So the extreme cases we're seeing, which is now prevalent every few months now, we're seeing the horror across our television screens, and we are all reacting in an extremely profound way to this. But those I would still consider extreme outliers.
Yes.
What you're talking about is essentially impacting all of our boys across the board.
Yes.
And across society. I'm the father. I have 2 sons, one in high school, one in middle school. What is it that we can do as a society, and specifically whether you are a nuclear family or a divorced family or whatever it may be, what are those solutions to impact the boys and give them that?
Yes. Good. The most important single solution is understand that the Achilles heel of all human beings is our inability to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive. If you train yourself to be able to communicate well by hearing the criticisms your partner needs to share with you, you will begin to be much more likely to have fewer divorces to begin with. If you do have a divorce, there's 4 things that must happen. You must have an equal amount of time with father and mother. You must have no bad-mouthing that the child can overhear from father to mother. You must have live within about 20 minutes drive time from each other, and you must have couples communication counseling. If you are a single mom and there's nothing you can do to change that, get your children involved with either Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, or faith-based communities. Faith-based communities, particularly where there are boys groups where boys can talk with each other, share their feelings, their hurts, their pains, with good male role models. Get your son involved with mentors, but also get your son to be a mentor. If you are in an intact family, be very disciplined about having family dinner nights, maybe once a week at least, and structure those family dinner nights so they don't become family dinner nightmares. I have in the appendix of the Boy Crisis, I have exactly the way to set up a family dinner night so that everyone in the family feels heard and they don't have to keep their feelings to themselves and withdraw. Very important dimension of
You refer to some of these aspects of the actual family and the control that parents have. But we're starting to see something which is now going outside of the family, and it isn't just starting. We've seen it now for decades, and that is the cultural impact, the educational systems, our media, pop culture, and how that impacts. You refer earlier to video games and entertainment. In a world where everybody is now connected and the kids are looking down at their phones the entire time, what can parents do to, in some way, get the kids off the phones and focused on other issues and not having that impact? Academia, for example, okay? It's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's almost as if the state wishes to take ownership over the children and control the children's perspective on things over the family.
Yes, well, it's certainly, what can you do? First, the most important single thing to do is to be connected in a strong and consistent way with your kids. So, for example, roughhousing helps create a bond with the children, and then the children, when you enforce a boundary, they don't think of you as like the enemy because they know that boundary comes from somebody that has just played with them and will play with them again.
Okay.
And then kids get that they have to do their homework and they have to brush their teeth and get completely ready to do all their chores before you do more roughhousing with them or before you read them their favorite story. And so the first thing that we need to do is to understand that there's about 10 significant differences between what I call dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. It is so important that there be what I call checks and balance parenting, that the father and mother understand the value of both of their types of parenting, that they communicate with each other about the value of that. So that means dads need to study what their type of parenting contributes to the children, why the dad-style parenting tends to lead to children being more empathetic, which is counterintuitive, why it leads to children being more able to distinguish between what's assertive and what is being assertive and being aggressive. And mom-style parenting has a great deal of assurance and underlying security that it gives the children. And so dads and moms need to look at every family situation and be discussing that not only with each other, but also with the kids. We want this outcome for you, Jimmy or Sally, and and here's what Mom and I are thinking about would be the best way to get that outcome. What's your input? But after you get the child's input, the parents make the decision. In terms of electronics, parents need to make it clear that at family dinner nights in particular, there are no electronics at the table. If the electronics get brought to the table, the electronics get taken from the child and get given back to them either later in the evening, or if it's a multiple violation, not for a day. If it's a multiple violation, not for a week. And so the parents need to take charge. The kids cannot be in charge of the parents.
Last question for you, and I do appreciate you taking the time on this, Doctor. We are now seeing an overwhelming response from many and people will call it the cultural right. I don't believe so. I think there's an intellectualism that is out there now, and you're starting to see that from Dr. Jordan Peterson. You're starting to see that from feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers, that they are talking about this. They are talking about the fact that the boy crisis, as you call it, is a real thing. Do you feel in any way that there is a pendulum that may be swinging back now because more and more people are talking about this, or are we just out in the wilderness too far gone at this point?
Well, no, there is the beginning of a pendulum swinging back. What I feel sad about is that the pendulum is beginning to swing back because boys are hurting us. When boys were just killing themselves, like as in committing suicide, we weren't very concerned about what was happening with boys. Now that it's clearly it's 22 mass shootings this year, and it's all school shootings, and it's all boys doing it, and so we're suddenly saying, what is happening with our sons? So sadly, now we are paying attention to what's happening to boys, because boys who hurt us. And they don't only hurt us in terms of the shootings. They hurt us in terms that almost every single ISIS recruit from the United States, male and female, is a dad-deprived boy or girl. And so these are the things that the price that we are paying psychologically and just fiscally for not having fathers involved in the family is enormous.
Yeah. On the 22 number, I just want to interject real quickly there, just so you know, that is a number that was purported by CNN that has been debunked. They're including people that were walking on campus with a BB gun, but one is too many.
Yes, absolutely.
One is too many. Right. So anyway, so the boy crisis, we can find that where?
Amazon is the least expensive place to get it, in Barnes & Noble for sure.
Terrific. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.
Dr. Warren Farrell, thank you.